Over the past 5 years, I've dedicated a chunk of time every year to doing roundups from a particular year of my favourite games. They've largely been forged to the same format. I will talk about the news of that year, usually in a UK-centrically way, concentrating on sports, politics and cultural trends, giving your old member berries a good old tug so it spurts nostalgia in the inside of your skull. Then I get all embarrassed and apologise for not having played every game that year, or for not having enjoyed the games as much as other people, while showing those games on screen as if to say, I'm so sorry I didn't like Sonic or Halo as much as you, Mr. Stranger. I promise that doesn't mean I'm a dog-punching Nazi as well. That's what's kind of going on at the moment, by the way. I don't mean I'm punching dogs. I mean you're looking at games that have not made my top 100. Doesn't mean they're bad games. It means I haven't played them or I don't like them as much as the other games that are featured here. And there's a lot of these games because a lot of games came out in between 2010 and 2019. So yeah, if you've seen your fifth favourite game from 2017 in here, it means it's not made my top 100 list. So sorry about that, and the reason this bit's so long and longer than it is normally is so I can fit all these games in here because there's a lot of games that came out. The next bit of the video I would normally do is I would have a top 10 of that year with a little review of each game. Why haven't I done a 2010 video followed by a 2011 video in a couple of weeks, working all the way to 2014, and then next year done 15 to 2019 is, well, for a couple of reasons. First, this predominantly is a retro games channel. 2010 is almost certainly retro now, I get that. If you go back from the PS2's launch in 2000, you will be back in the height of the 8-bit micro era in the UK and the start of the Nintendo Entertainment System's dominance in the United States. And we certainly considered, when the PS2 came out, the NES, the Spectrum, the Commodore 64 to be retro machines back then. And while I will do the occasional review from the 2010s on my channel, I don't expect to do them very often. So my wheelhouse is definitely in between 85 and 2010, I would say. This, in a way, will also explain reason number 2 on why I'm not doing a video for each year. Basically, the 2010s became the point when I certainly dropped a lot of my interest in keeping up with it all. Life got in the way, be it the coming of life in the fact that I had a son now, or, well, death as well. You know, as you get older, people you know start to die a lot more. It was certainly a period of time when in any given year I may play next to no new games. It certainly dipped and troughed throughout the decade. I simply feel that I couldn't do justice to a list of, say, 2011 or 2019, say. I don't have a PC that can run the newest games, nor a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series console. And I find a lot of joy in the Switch store these days when I do eventually play a new game. I'm a retro gamer. I don't play a lot of the newer games. So yes, the waffle is nearly done. I've decided to compile the whole decade into one big long video. Could have explained that a lot quicker, I know. But anyway, here are the major events of the decade, which I'm going to try and cram into about 3 minutes or less. It's not like anything major happened in the 2010s, is it, right? Right? The decade started off with a change in the UK government. Labour were out, the Conservatives and, at the time, the Lib Dems were in. And, well, the Conservatives are still in power at the time of recording in 2023. And I think you could best sum up their efforts of governments through the last 13 years by just having a look at this clip.
Someone drove a hot dog-shaped car through the window!
Ah, come on! Whoever did this, just confess. We promise we won't be mad.
Ooh. We had the Olympics in London in 2012, a huge sporting event that seemed to bring together the country in tremendous fashion, something that we've definitely built on. England's football team had a curious decade. being terrible for most of the time, with a thrashing at the hands of Germany at South Africa 2010, essentially playing as a brick wall in their defeat to Italy in 2012, finishing bottom of their group in World Cup 2014 before losing to a country with a population so small that they have to be damn careful not to sleep with a distant relative, that being Iceland in Euro 2016. Despite all that crap play, they've managed to look a lot better since getting to semi-finals, quarter-finals and even a final. Well done them. 2016 was a year that the US and Britain decided that they would have a go at this cult of personality, burn it to the ground populism lark that we used to sneer at other countries for. The same year, loads of our favourite celebrities worldwide died as well, ascending to the afterlife because they didn't want to deal with that divisive bollocks. Movies. Do you like Marvel? Do you? Well, that's all you'll ever get to watch again. That's all that ever seems to come out in the cinema these days. That said, the Infinity War and Endgame double bill was the perfect culmination and felt like a real huge event in cinema, which just still keeps going. But at least it did that better than the return of Star Wars, which none of us were expecting to see again, and probably wish they hadn't brought back, because it's actually made us a bit nostalgic for the prequels, hasn't it? Because at least they had, I don't know, some sort of overall direction, as opposed to pass the script parcel between Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams. Just bloody wing it, like I'm going to do with this top 100. So yes, overall, the 2010s, not great. Thank God they're over. I'm sure the 2020s will be better. On to the games. Thanks for being patient. All the games on this list would have come out during this particular decade for the first time. Remasters are only allowed in if the game is sufficiently different, but for the most part it will be games that came out between January the 1st, 2010 and December the 31st, 2019. That will be in this list. All the games in the top 100 list will be games that I've personally enjoyed during that decade. Please do tell me which ones that I've got wrong and which ones you'd have put in your own top 100 if they're not here. Let us start with number 100. So let's start this exhaustive list with this one, a sad entry for me. This was the last entry for one of my favourite ever game franchises before it was rebranded eFootball to miserable results. Pro Evolution Soccer 2019 built on the engine redesign of Pro Evolution Soccer 2018, with the ball having much more realistic physics than ever before, and some much needed improvements to the season mode's negotiation system finally happened right at the death. Was it the best Pro Evolution Soccer of the decade? No, I think probably the best one of those was perhaps 2013 or 2016, but its placement in this list is really an entry down to a rather emotional and selfish reason. Konami finally Konami'd their last remaining diamond. Curse you, Konami! It's her out of Heroes. It's him out of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's bloody Freddie Mercury, innit? Until Dawn is a highly polished survival horror come interactive drama with incredible graphics and great actors doing a bit of scariness in the mountains. It is a B movie you can interact with, and your score is determined by how many of these young people are still alive when that there dawn arrives and smothers your survivors in the light of day, and indeed renewed hope. It is possible to save everyone, which would make for a really boring horror film. Make your decisions wisely then, and they will live. Make another decision that's wise, and give this a bloody go, will you? Another survival horror then. Games like Amnesia and this one brought a spark to the survival horror genre, one that remained pretty constant across the decade with umpteen of this type of horror title both AAA and indie. It's got all the usual spookery of your Silent Hill or your Resident Evil, but you're almost completely powerless to stop the scary things from scaring you up and giving you a good scaring. It's an unsettling prospect, and if you or I encountered a horrible monster, we probably wouldn't have access to an AR-15 because we don't live in the United States of schooly shotgunny slaughter. We would have to run. That's how we would cope. And that's how you cope in this game. It's a brilliant concept, and it was rarely bettered than in this bowel-loosening journey into a disturbing asylum. The cleverest part about this game is the fact that it doesn't even let you see a lot. You view much of the game through your night vision camera, and those batteries, they don't last very long, so every time you find them, you cling onto them like they were your firstborn. It ramps up the tension incredibly. Outlast, it will make you emit weird squeals of fear that will make even the most lazy and selfish household dogs look at you with concern, and perhaps even rest their muzzles upon your leg. Dark Souls was the new hotness by the time this Star Wars title arrived, and you know what? Star Wars was in need of a bit of an attractive young thing to hook its wagon upon, as it was a franchise experience at, say, a midlife crisis. While far from being the best example of the genre, Jedi Fallen Order is perfect for someone like me. I'm really bad at Souls games. This one's of medium difficulty, I'd say, and it's bloody Star Wars, and I'll apologise for even the most dire Star Wars things. I didn't even mind Caravan of Courage. It's not for everyone. In fact, I don't think Dark Souls players will enjoy it that much. But it is one of the few games I played to its absolute conclusion in the 2010s. So it's going to get on this list because I really didn't do a lot of that in the 2010s at all. It's like a next level good Force Unleashed, and it showed that gingers can be Jedi too. Kirby is a strange series. On a surface level, most Kirby games are fairly simple, easy yet well-designed Nintendo platformers starring a hungry testicle with the power of Rogue from the X-Men. Later games are a little deeper and darker than that the more you explore. But that's not the case here. This is pure goofy Kirby, but without the series' main hook. That being that Kirby can eat things and absorb their power. Here, Kirby is a piece of yarn, and yarn doesn't eat. Instead, you twist him into different shapes like parachutes, cars and submarines, giving us a graphically stunning 2D platformer that is incredibly gratifying to play on either the 3DS or the Wii. It's not massively difficult, but it embraces its woolly premise well. Knit one, purl one. What an unusual lifespan No Man's Sky had. When No Man's Sky was announced, the collective jaw drop of gamers was so loud it could be heard in deep space, which, as sound can't even be heard in space, that's impossible. The trailers promised something equally impossible. Revealed in 2013, the game promised a potential 18 quintillion planets to explore, procedurally generated of course, and gameplay that would have been a super tarted up version of Elite for the PS4 generation. As exciting as that sounded, and it was certainly hyped from here to Pluto, the 2016 release was a far cry from what was promised. We were promised a meal at a 5-star restaurant, and what we got was a yellow stickered Tesco pork pie. Yet you have to take your hats off, because slavish after release work has seen this title recover a lot of pride, and it's now a pretty decent effort. It's earned its place here rather than being left on planet 3,237,037. What started as a Silent Hill game, Konami, eventually emerged as something completely different from Hideo Kojima and Sony Studios. Daryl from The Walking Dead, old Norman Reedus, is this game's star, and you're essentially playing as a human Amazon delivery van strutting goods across a post-apocalyptic American landscape. To explain just what's going on would take up much of the video, but just know that dear Hideo is still as bonkers as a sweater full of Dachshunds. It's a singularly unique open world action game, and I encourage you to give it a try, even though that premise sounds really bloody weird. But it is still a lot of fun. Dishonored 2 is a sequel done right. Corvo is back and he's stealthing his way around more fantasy cities, this time alongside his regal daughter Emily Caldwin. An action-adventure with an open-ended structure and supernatural abilities, Dishonored 2 is a brilliantly designed epic with some fascinating secrets for those who care to look for them. Plus, there's a galaxy of stars involved with this. Pedro Pascal, Rosaria Dawson, Sam Rockwell and Vincent D'Onofrio are just some of the actors that crop up in this stabby splendid stabby-a-thon, and if you missed it in 2016, I can heartily recommend catching up and playing it now. If there's one thing about the 2010s gaming scene I do like, it's how much further it pushed the medium into new areas. Storytelling came to the fore in a lot of games, sometimes being the main focus above gameplay itself. This may sound counterintuitive, and I get why, we're a bit stuck in our ways, but I don't know why games shouldn't be conduits for stories as much as a movie or a good book. This is a great, but not the only example in this list, of a good story-based game. Made using RPG Maker XP, it's anything but an RPG. Two scientists create Black Mirror-style fake memories for dying patients. This procedure involves exploring the real memories of their subjects, and this tale finds them in the head of Johnny, a man with a troubled past and an even more troubled future. Boy, is it raw. You will emote. Go emote. Another indie game and another great story with Night in the Woods, this time featuring listless millennial hipster anthropomorphic animals. If that sounds a little bit annoying, it probably isn't going to be for you. A troubled 20-year-old returns to her hometown after dropping out of college, to her old friends and a struggling mining community. Strange things are afoot for May and her chums in this 2D exploratory adventure. Not for everyone, but I found it bloody charming. I am a smug twat though, as you've probably noticed. From Software were the kings of the 2010s for most, except this coward who couldn't get good enough. Bloodborne is an interesting title in that it takes us out of the medieval setting and plants us instead in a Victorian Gothic setting, not far removed from a Hammer horror movie. It's a sensational a world as any of the Dark Souls titles, oozing atmosphere. And it's got other traits from the series as well. A huge in-depth mythos and more of that exact, precise, bastard hard gameplay. It's brilliant, a great PS4 exclusive at the time, and a game which I wish I was better at. I'm fey and weak like a prematurely born baby mouse. But play Bloodborne, you'll probably love it. Oh my giddy aunt, we're back with another spooktacular, and this time we're trying to avoid cinema's favourite ant penis-shaped space monsters keen to stick their teeth tongues in our ribcage. Another minimal weaponry hide from the beastie type affair. Alien Isolation perhaps runs out of steam in its second half, but those early levels will have you jump-scaring out of your chair and cussing the heavens. Aliens is perfect fodder for a game like this, and it's probably the best ever use of the Aliens license that I've ever seen. It's authentic, and you'll void your bowels, so what's not to like? I mean, we all like voiding our bowels, don't we? What about an action platformer though? A bit like Metal Slug. Sounds good, doesn't it? Well, how about that, but with really destructive scenery? Well, imagine that, but you're also playing as every single major action movie character from the 70s, 80s and 90s. Fudge yes, sign me up. Broforce is an unashamedly boisterous dumb love letter to the very best of your dad's VHS collection, and I'm all for it. Nothing mind-blowing, but it's fantastic to see all these legally distinct legends together in a fun adventure where you can blow stuff up and then blow it up again, but as these fantastic characters. Yes, Robocop's in there. Yes, Neo from the Matrix is in there. Yes, Rambo's in there. If they're in a fairly known franchise from the 70s, 80s or 90s, they're in this game. No, not Surf Ninja. Arguably, Just Cause 2 is the peak of this open world series, with Rico Rodriguez grapple hooking his way through Southeast Asia and indeed our hearts. Just Cause's gameplay has been polished up with adjustments to mission design, artificial intelligence and other mechanics improved and placed in a huge game world. It's fun with physics all the way with this ridiculous adventure, with the grapple hook providing hours of silly, tethering fun and entertainment. It's not high art, but you'll be smiling like a freshly wanked gibbon playing this. Whee! We were, even the die-hard fans, just a little bit tired of that SmackDown gameplay by the time All Stars came out. Not before time, THQ finally provided an alternative in 2011. Some of the Federation's hugest names, past and present, were pitted against each other in an arcade-style brawl, with the over-the-top scale turned up beyond 11 to some number in the early 20s. These were the moves not possible in real life. These were the fights your action figures had when you were hairless in your pants. It's a little light on content for a wrestling game, but it was twice as playable thanks to its fighting game style, combat and cancels. It's as close to WrestleFest as the WWE have tried, and yes, I know that they also did a WrestleFest in the early 2012s, but it was absolute shite. WWE All-Stars though, it's brilliant, give it a go. If only to see the absolutely incredible video packages they did for wrestlers that have never fought before. Stone Cold versus CM Punk? Yes please. The best thing about Super Meat Boy is that you get as many tries to its stages as you like. I think it would be computer punchingly hateful without infinite goes, that's for sure. It is an exercise in pure hair-tearing frustration. Its pixel-perfect platforming ways are a bit too much for me, if I'm being honest. Yet because it's got those infinite lives, it is compulsive, really bloody compulsive. You'll spend many minutes on each level and hate every minute, and then the next level starts and you'll start playing again. The sense of achievement is real. Go grab your meat and give it a bloody good play with. Uncharted 3 is a Sony franchise tentpole that will give you a tentpole in your boxer shorts. What a handsome brute Nathan Drake is. He can turn a hetero man to quiche and nighttime excursions to the glory hole. Let me tell you that. Yes, this 2011 adventure is linear, but the Uncharted series is not about exploring, even though it's about an explorer. It's about getting your adrenaline pumping through your torso with its cinematic moments. It's, to use a very overused phrase, an absolute thrill ride. We're not done with Nate and Sully in this list, but this is an essential play for fans of energetic parkouring Indiana Jones nuts. Yoshi must have looked to the heavens and witnessed the world's most famous plumber titting around in space and decided he wanted his saddle warmed, travelling through the cosmos with his boy, because he's back for Mario Galaxy 2. Mario has to traverse yet more spherical planetoids in order to get the power stars required to liberate the regal napped Peach. Whereas Super Mario Galaxy redefined the platformer game yet again, with Mario at the forefront, this one instead refines the gameplay in just the same way that Mario's always done. His series of games redefine the platform game and then they refine the platform game. Nintendo, they're bloody good, aren't they? Let's stay in space with The Outer Wilds, a beautiful late-decade pan-star system adventure. Not only do you have to contend with where in this open mystery, but when, as the star system is trapped in an accelerated time loop, which you need to get to the bottom of, gathering clues and solving chronological puzzles along the way. It's going to make you squeak in wonderment like a mouse chewing smiley faces dropped at a 1991 rave, this one. It's an incredible experience and a beautiful one at that. Deserved more love at the time, I think. The zombie virus has spread from Willamette Mall in Colorado to Las Vegas, and it's now on stunt biker Chuck Green to survive the rampaging rotters and keep his bitten little un in enough Zombrex to keep her away from craving brain pie. It's more of the same from Dead Rising. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of zombies on screen at once. Barely survivable, but somehow you'll get through. Just like the American excess that this series parodies, that's okay because it's good, clean, zombie kicking fun. Oh boy, this is a somber one. You are cast as an immigration officer in a 1982 fictional Eastern Bloc country, and it's up to you to decide who can cross to safety and who can bloody well get to the gulag. There are criminals and terrorists who can definitely get in the bin, but what about that crying mother who doesn't have the right paperwork? She shouldn't go through, but you know that she kind of should. But what if it's a ruse and she ends up blowing up Parliament when she goes through? Judgment and empathy will play a part, no doubt. But if you go full Suella Braverman, then that's also a way to one of the game's 20 endings. You'll just be a fascist, though. In a similar vein, we're still in a bleak, war-torn Eastern European country with this war of mine, as you take charge of the innocent civilians of conflict instead of its soldiers. It's a different viewpoint of war, with your survivors bartering and scraping by, getting just enough medical supplies and food to get through to the next week. Unscrupulous criminals and soldiers can end that week pretty quickly. It's a raw emotional experience, and just like Papers, Please, it is a game that will test your humanity as much as your skills. It is a masterful piece of work. Okay, so it's a bit of a change of pace from the previous two entries, and this is here purely because it made me laugh with its spinning winkles. I had a lot of fun, and this Xbox Live game is basically a game where you have to try and make a mountain of big oily fellas into as tall a structure as possible, using really difficult, finger-hurtingly painful controls. But you know what? Because of Swinging Dicks, it's earned its place right here. Also, it's quite fun. That I played Cruising Blast first on the Switch in the 2020s, that's immaterial, as Cruising Blast was a ridiculously fun racing game first birthed into bowling alleys. And where do they put arcades now? It is the purest of arcade racers, with world landmarks blowing up left, right and centre, and just silliness smeared all over its wheel arches. It's a highlight reel from the entire Fast and Furious franchise. If Vin Diesel saw this, he'd be begging his mum for a pound coin, and he would be right to do so. It is a hand-sweatingly fun trip to adrenal-pumped happiness, the sort of things we used to experience in the times of Outrun and Daytona. It had been a fair while since we last caught up with angry slaphead Kratos, a solid 5 years on so it was. He's moved from sunny Greece and its Mount Olympus full of dastardly deities to the chilly wastes of Norway, and he's now retired and living with his son Atreus. The trouble with Norway, though, is it's also full of violent gods, so maybe he should have just moved to Jersey or St Vincent. Do they have warrior gods? I don't know. God of War is the game redesigned. It's more open world now. It's artful, it's epic, and it's got great combat and world design. It's a real showcase for the PS4 in its dying days. Life is Strange is a story-driven episodic graphic adventure that follows teenager Max Caulfield in her day-to-day life at the Blackwell Academy. And she just so happens to have the power to turn back time. But that's not a great power, is it though? Because it's at the cost of the space-time continuum folding in on itself. Eek. Max finds herself using her powers to make life better for her and her best friend and possible love interest, Chloe. But these things do have consequences, and it's up to you to decide when to use them. Great writing and a good story make this a hearty recommendation indeed. I prefer it to the sequels. Just like the OG Star Wars, it's the middle part of the Mass Effect trilogy that's the best one. BioWare carried on their good work from the decent Mass Effect first game and enhanced the third-person combat mechanic, which when wedded to the excellent spacefaring RPG elements that I love from KOTOR, made this one of the best Microsoft-timed exclusives. A fascinating epic storyline with excellent characterizations, Mass Effect 2 had top-tier cinematography, stirring music and system-pushing graphics. The third game's OTT DLC and controversial ending were a disappointing close to the original trilogy, but Mass Effect 2 is as perfect a middle section as you could ever hope for. Character action games were taken to a new level with the second in the Bayonetta series. Much like Mass Effect 2, this game was given a right old spruce up, with the gameplay and graphics ramped up. Platinum Games, once again at the height of their powers, deliver a masterclass in replayability. There's a ton of depth to the combat that will encourage you to constantly return so you can improve on how you knock out the vengeful angels. Bayonetta is one graceful lady and shouldn't have to deal with no worthless chode thrusting her curvaceous body about, and you will be encouraged to give it your all so you improve. Bayonetta is superb, explosive, fun. MGS, for so long a very linear corridor type of affair, was given the key to the door of the open world and encouraged you to explore. For some, this wasn't the best decision, and the game definitely feels unfinished in its later half, thanks to the decidedly dicey relationship between the exiting Hideo Kojima and Konami at the time. It was highly divisive, but for me it was a solid farewell to Kojima with more options for stealthy soldier elimination than ever before. And it's not even the best iteration of Metal Gear Solid 5 that came out, more in that later. But this game has the advantage of being able to do this to goats. Whee!
This is the story of a man named Stanley.
The Stanley Parable is a highly original concept. A narrator talks you through the game, telling you where to go. If you do what he says, the game ends fairly quickly and isn't fun at all. But be defiant. The more you explore, the more exasperated he gets, and the more and more you'll uncover about the game's many, many secrets. It's a fascinating exploration into choice in video games, with a lot to uncover. Clever idea and well delivered. People are still finding new things about it in 2023. Transformers Fall of Cybertron being above the other games I've already mentioned is true to my YouTube title of being a man-child. This doesn't and wouldn't get a place in most people's top 100 games of the decade, though both it and its forebear War on Cybertron are perfectly solid 3D shooters. But I've put this entry here because my childhood love of the Transformers toys saw me dedicating more time to this than many better games on this list. Good Transformers games just weren't a thing for me growing up, and while I really liked the PS2 game and found myself excusing a lot about Ocean's Spectrum game, these were the first genuinely excellent Transformers games. Well, for me at least. You wait ages for a decent Transformers game, and then 3 come out at once. Well, within a few years of each other anyway. Our pals at Platinum are at it again, as you can see. It is definitely a love letter to the original 80s cartoon. A superb looking character action game this, and the Jay's Man-Child Nostalgia Tour is once again applied, as Bayonetta is assuredly an objectively better game than this. This didn't sell incredibly well, so my dreams of them following this up with the Transformers the Movie 86 adaptation was never to be, alas. Even if you're not a child like me, I do insist you give it a go. It is still bloody good fun, and it looks beautiful, doesn't it? Autobots, roll out! I promise this is the last Transformers game in this list. You won't see a tremendous amount of mobile phone games in this list, despite it being the most popular gaming format of the 2010s. This, though, is a classic game, given the endless runner treatment, taking the cool gameplay of Pac-Man and planting the poor yellow bugger in a maze he will never see the edge of. Indeed, not only that, he's pursued Langolier style by the corrupted data from the infamous 256th level kill screen from the original game. How clever is that, by the way? Pac-Man is given multiple power-ups that can be improved via multiple playthroughs, and multiple playthroughs will be the order of the day here, as this is incredibly addictive stuff. Wacka 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 wacka. This was a thing, wasn't it? Pokemon Go. Blimey, seems so long ago now. It deserves a place on the list just for the amount of people who nearly got mowed down while tossing Pokeballs on busy roads at imaginary Squirtles. 2016. What a time to be alive. Pokemon Go, though, it was a bonding experience and definitely deserves to be here. Ori and the Blind Forest was an extremely gorgeous 2D platformer with genuine heart. The game sees a spirit explore a forest after its adoptive parental figure passes away after a cataclysm destroys most of their wooded home. It's a Metroidvania title, a 10-hour journey in a fantastical world that will give you a warm feeling of accomplishment because it is quite tough at times. It's not easy, and there are some frustrating sections that would have pushed the game higher on the list if they hadn't made me cuss to high heaven. Formerly on the Xbox as an exclusive, well worth checking out now if you've got a Switch, as it's on there these days. Ori's a great game, give it a go, Switch owners. Janky weird silliness is always going to score highly with me, and there are few games as janky and silly as Deadly Premonition. In many respects, it's a bit of a fan game to Twin Peaks and has gained quite the cult following despite its initial poor sales performance, to the point that it got a special edition and sequel in later years. Parts of the game are very poorly implemented. It's clumsy, the graphics are terrible at times, and it has an uneven tone and paucity of key features. But you know what? These are all part of its charm. Yes, it's deeply flawed, but it's a charming open world survival horror detective game that you've just got to see to believe. I know I've not really talked it up much here, but it's at 65 for a reason. It's a good game. Seriously, No, I've not talked it up. It is a good game. Good scrolling beat-em-ups have made a bit of a comeback in recent years, but when Scott Pilgrim came out, they weren't really a thing anymore. River City Ransom on the NES, with its RPG elements, skill upgrades and shops, is definitely a key influence on Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. And its multiple upgradable characters and lengthy quests will have you coming back for more once you've finished the main quest. The comic book's art style lends itself well to this format, and the Game Boy-esque music completes the package. It's good nostalgic fun for people of a certain age. Tied in with the movie, the game was unavailable for quite a while, but it did get a re-release to pretty much everything in 2021, so there's no excuse for you not to try it out. Unless you don't like scrolling beat-em-ups, in which case don't. I've never been able to keep up with the Yakuza series, as whenever I turn around to do anything, be it my laundry, or picking something up off the floor, or spying on a dog's testicles using binoculars from an upstairs window, Sega will end up releasing another one in that time period. This one, a prequel set in the late 80s, seemed like a good time for me to join in, and it's still the only one I've ever played. I will change that at some point, as Yakuza 0 is brilliant fun and full of little mini games and fun little side hustles, and as a series it's delivering on the promises that Sega couldn't keep with Dreamcast Shenmue. A fun open world of this, and definitely worthy of your time and attention. Rockstar's detective film noir open world game has the usual high level of detail that you'd expect from them. It's perhaps not in the same conversations as their best efforts, but it is its own thing, and a clever thing at that. You search each crime scene for clues, search for witnesses, and interrogate suspects with a detailed and never seen before system that relies on you being able to read physical reactions in the face of your captives. That stuff simply was not possible on any generation of computers or consoles before this one. It doesn't quite hang together as well as some of Rockstar's other efforts, and there certainly isn't the amount of variety and things to do that are in those games. But I think there's enough here for even those who wouldn't normally like a GTA or a Red Dead title to get their teeth into. It's a clever game. I think this game is a little bit divisive, particularly with people like Chris Diamond, but I had a fun time indeed with this stretched reworking of the Midgar segment of the most beloved RPG of all time. The only thing that's really held over from the late 90s classic is the overall storyline, and even that has a few unexpected twists and turns during its duration. It's a completely new game really, just with characters you've loved for 25 years. You should still feel dirty for fancying old Thunderjug's Tifa, but at least she doesn't look like this anymore. I look forward to the next instalment of Final Fantasy VII, and hopefully it's as good as this one. They fight and fight, and fight and fight and fight. Fight, 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 fight. It's the big old Nintendo punch-up show. No more singing, I promise. The greatest roster in gaming history has decided they need to make Gum's divorced molars, perhaps for the last time, with this Nintendo Switch swan song. Well, I don't think it will, but I think it certainly seems to be the last time Masahiro Sakurai is going to be involved with it. And boy, have they invited everyone and their mother this time around. I half expected to see Rene from Hello Cartoon Fun or the lead character from Fat One Blows a Sparky to show up and knock some of Sonic's eyebrow hairs out. There's so many characters in this game, it is unreal, not all Nintendo games either. It's one of the best 4-player party games you could ever hope to play. If you've got 4 controllers and a Nintendo Switch, you should have this game already. This is another game that would be an awful lot higher in this list if I was any good at video games. What a visual masterpiece it is, styled after the very earliest Golden Age animations. It's surreal that these beautiful visuals are married to a super hard Contra-style shooter, but it works together very well indeed. If you're up for the challenge, then get involved with the devil-dueling pair of Cuphead and Mugman in their quest to recover their souls. Just be warned that you probably won't finish it unless you're really good at video games. Cuphead, it's bloody good. It's sometimes the simplest ideas that work the best, and there's not a lot to this game. You've got 2 sword-wielding stickmen and they want to pass each other and get to the other end of their final screen, so they can sacrifice themselves to a giant skyworm, because why wouldn't you? Nidhogg is an absolutely brilliant competitive game to play, relying on reactions and cunning to beat your opponent rather than a multitude of buttons and combos. It is a 2-player treat and way better than its ugly, sprited sequel. I can't really explain why this game is so good, but give it a go. It's probably really cheap on Steam or the PlayStation Network at the moment, and you'll see what I mean. But only in 2 players though, on 1 player it's rubbish. These are 2 separate games, I should point out, but they are very, very much related, and in fact Frog Fractions 2 does appear in Glitter Mitten Grove. And already I feel, just by saying that, I've given too much away about it. I can't tell you anything about these games beyond this. These are not how they seem, and if I tell you anything else about them, I'm letting you down. That's how good these games are. Make of that what you will. Either play them or don't. I think you should. It really, really isn't what it looks like. I loved Strider on the Mega Drive. What a flashy game to introduce me to Sega's 16-bit console. I also really loved Symphony of the Night on the PlayStation 1, so imagine my absolute delight when Capcom released this. It is a remake of Strider that played like a Metroidvania. All of my Christmases at once, mate. Yeah, there was a version of Strider that was a little bit like this on the NES, but it couldn't hope to have the flash of that Mega Drive game, and well, the NES game wasn't that good at all anyway. This is a game that I never knew I wanted, but this was a first day purchase when I found out it did exist. It sounded perfect for me, and you know what? It was. It's not known enough about this game, and I think there are probably better games in the genre, but if you're of a certain age and you liked Strider, I reckon you should give it a go, because as Metal Jesus would say, it is a right hidden gem. Gory space butchering of body horror space mutants was never better than this second laser cut slice of meat from the Dead Space franchise. It'll stick the willies right up you as you guide Isaac Clarke around a space station full of horrible, horrible things. You go around severing uglies and solving devious space-based puzzles. The story is a step up from the previous game, as is the creepy atmosphere. This was a game met with universal acclaim, and rightly so. A very icky, very good survival horror. Demon Souls was From Software's first attempt at a bastard hard fantasy action role player, but it was Dark Souls that really started getting people to notice its sassy, frustratingly hard but beautiful realised wiles. A deep, intricately designed world combined with smart combat gave us a dread-inducing dark fantasy dripping in tension, and the start of a love affair that, while I can't quite get on board with it, I can see why it is as beloved as it is. I'm just bad at these games, I'm sorry. It is better than this. It should be higher on the list. And just tell me why I'm wrong in the comments and I'll get on with my day. Thanks. Yet another action role player set in a cheekily grey world of apocalyptic misery, and equally as good. I found this spin-off with its huge immersive map and compelling miserable world to be a great jumping on point for the Fallout series, despite its bugs and performance issues. It's fantastically expansive and full of secrets, like a fat girl with a lot of former lovers. I probably should get round to playing the others, but I'm really lazy, so just tell me in the comments where I should go, and I might do it if I'm feeling bothered. But yes, Fallout, New Vegas. It's probably not as good as some of the other ones in the series, but it's my only Fallout in this list. Tell me I'm wrong again. I love it when people tell me I'm wrong. Another action role player? Yes, but Nier Automata is a bit different. Gameplay changes constantly for the androids we control through this layered story that absolutely requires multiple playthroughs to see its complete tale. It's such an intelligent plot that you'll be compelled to put up with its just superb gameplay. Yeah, it's good all round, this game. Poor old you, having to play this game multiple times. It's brilliant though. And also check out Nier 1 as well, because that had a similar premise as well, in the fact that you had to play through it multiple times, and it got better and better and better if you did. Seriously, the story gets better the more you play it. I'm not kidding. Lost for so long on the ill-fated Wii U, players for the Switch, Xbox and PlayStation consoles are finally getting to see what the fuss was about. Well, there wasn't any fuss, but there should have been. Platinum Games are at it again, with a creative effort that puts you in the tights of not just one superhero, but an Avengers movie growing cast of super dudes and super dudettes. They work together as one unit, forming giant objects called Unite Morphs and taking on huge, city-destroying adversaries. Does that sound amazing? Well, it bloody is. It's not for everyone, but I love it. Wonderful 101, not half. A bloody demo? In the middle position of the best games of the entire decade? Not only that, but a demo that was just one short corridor that looped. Yes, and PT deserves to be there. Why? Because this demo, for a game that never was in a PlayStation Silent Hill, is simply put the most effectively horrifying and unsettling horror experience that I've ever encountered. It is terrifying to play this game. It just puts you on edge. In the end, we got Death Stranding, which is also a good game. But I think another Silent Hill game like this, it could have been incredible. I think we all need to go and shout at Konami again. Konami! Saints Row 3, it was very silly. Given that the most up-to-date GTA was the rather dry and dour Grand Theft Auto 4, Saints Row 3, well, it was the exact opposite of this. It definitely doesn't take itself seriously in any way. It's full of hilarious side missions, it's stuffed full of mini-games, and it has ridiculous story elements and daft physics that couldn't be counted on the fingers of 1,000 children. Burt Reynolds, Hulk Hogan and adult entertainer, so I'm told, Sasha Grey all show up, and I think you should show up too, as you need to get this ridiculousness and rub it all over your eyes. Platinum again, and here they are with an excellent action third-person shooter. You control Sam Gideon, an agent in an augmented reaction suit. The suit is an agile beast, and you'll feel as stylish as a square-jawed handsome man with a good haircut and a crisp suit as you swoop around, putting holes in things that want to put holes in you. It is a joy to behold, absolutely exhilarating to play, and it's all over a bit too quickly. But while it lasts, it's fun. That's what she said. Star Wars Battle Pod is less of a game and more of an experience. It follows in the tradition of the previous arcade high points of the franchise, that being a rail shooter that shows off the film's best moments. But by 2014, the technology existed that we have the audio-visual capabilities to accurately recreate the battles of Hoth, Yavin, Endor, and even, thanks to an update, Takodana from the Force Awakens movie. The experience is further helped by the dome you enclose yourself in, which, despite looking like one of those washing machine balls from the 90s, helps seal you away from the real world and all its terrible things like sheep, swans, dog's lips and Ridley's chewing gum, and all the other bad things as well. Those things might be in the pod with you. If they are, get out. Another open world game, and at times a bit of a janky one. Sleeping Dogs, though, has enormous charm. Originally part of the True Crime series, but development issues saw Activision drop it like a hot stone, and it was caught by the very asbestosy hands of Square Enix, who then released it, after a bit more time in the oven anyway. Christ, those metaphors are mixed. 4 years in the oven and we're left with this. a wonderful little tour around Hong Kong. Wei Shen is a highly skilled Chinese-American cop who must parkour, high kick, sprint, shoot and swim about this beautiful city. The combat is similar to the Arkham series, which truly gives it a unique feel when compared to the other GTA type games. It's an incredible setting, Hong Kong, and you can't kick strangers in the face if you go there on holiday, so why don't you get this instead? Or stop wanting to kick strangers in the face. One of the two. It's become a household name thanks to Henry Cavill's turn that wet lady gussets worldwide. But Witcher 3 is an incredible game in its own right that could last you years. There's just so much content in this game. It's an open world action RPG with a hugely immersive play area and enough side quests to keep you so busy for so long that you won't notice your hair is growing as long and white as the man himself. It's a title dripping in effort and one you do well to get on board with. Capcom have been busily remaking their original titles, along with furthering the series with 7 and Village, all to a very high standard. This expands the plot of Resident Evil 2, the world, and obviously the presentation to great effect. Resident Evil 2 is a fan favourite in the old games, and this remake is a great way to revisit Leon's maiden zombie encounter. But be warned, its new gore damage engine is all kinds of gross. Ew! Initially put on the Wii U and then glammed up for the deluxe edition on the Switch, Mario Kart 8 is another quality addition to the legendary series that's still having content added to it at the time of recording. It's more of the same from Mario and his pals, but that's no bad thing. It's a multiplayer institution at this stage, and more drivers, cars and courses looking shinier than ever is all that us Mario Kart fans can possibly ask for. Mario will be driving around in a tiny car long after I'm in the ground, and I'll enjoy every iteration until I do end up swallowing soil near a church. That doesn't really sum up Mario Kart, does it, very well? I should have saved that one for the Resident Evil 2 review. Anyway, you've probably got this game already, but if you haven't, what are you doing, mate? Lara had taken a bit of a back seat a few years prior to this remake, but it was good to have the old girl back in a whole new, more cinematic adventure. Just as Nate Drake took influence from Lara, she clearly had a respectful look back at him and his work in the Uncharted series. If it makes both series better, they can continue to copy each other's homework for all I care. This was a reboot of Lara's character, and you can see the trauma and struggle with this young woman and what she goes through as she survives as much as she explores in this first adventure. It's one of those games you'll want to see the end of, and I'm sure you will. Lara Reborn is fantastic. The third and final entry in the Dark Souls series sees Hidetaka Miyazaki return after sitting out the second entry. The world is just as beguilingly huge and darkly beautiful as it has ever been, and each shadowy recess contains threateningly tough creatures and menacing bosses that are as exhilarating to fight as any game in gaming history. Fantastic game design and yet another deep lore dark tale for decent gamers and those with more perseverance than me. I am a Fey milquetoast coward, and you should tell me in the comments why this should be in the top 20. It should, I know, but I'm crap at video games. Go on, slate me. Set between The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings movie trilogies, Shadows of Mordor puts you in the leather boots of a wraith-bonded ranger as Sauron builds his orc forces to put the whole of Middle-earth in deep shtuck. Great movie replicating atmosphere, fantastic Arkham-style combat and hundreds of moves help make this one of the best Lord of the Rings games ever made. Special mention must go to the Nemesis system, which gives an AI to some of the enemies which you will see throughout the game's duration. They will learn from your previous encounters and react accordingly. It was very clever at the time, and it was good to see enemies get this sort of level of AI and character through their encounters with you. You'll just have to find new ways to beat them. So yeah, Shadows of Mordor, absolutely top class AAA gaming. But while we're on the subject, the Hobbit films, how come they get away with like being that bad? They're really bad, aren't they? Like Star Wars prequel level or worse. Here's Nathan again in what looks like his final adventure. Mind you, they said that about Indiana Jones, and he's tossing aside his Werther's original for another walkabout in the cinema in 2023. The grunt of the PS4 gives Drake a flashier send-off than what was possible in the PlayStation 3 days of his previous exploits. Superb gameplay, more exciting cinematic moments, a brilliant story, and definitely some of the system's best ever graphics contribute to a retirement for one of Sony's best ever game heroes. As exciting to watch as it is to play, whoever's sharing the sofa with you should probably get the popcorn in. There's a billion and umpty thousand first-person shooters out there. So what makes this one so tickety-boo in my eyes? Especially as it looks like someone's just re-released the Amiga version of RoboCop 3 in 2016. Or perhaps taken the graphics from Star Fox and gone, there you go, there's a first-person shoot-em-up. Well, it is a first-person shoot-em-up, yes, but there is a lot more to it than that. The trick is that you don't exist in standard time, really. Your enemies can only move when you do. What this does, it enables you to plot your next move and do so elaborately using all the environments and weapons in your disposal. Superhot is a strategy game, a puzzle game, and when you play all the scenes back together, it makes you feel like you're like Clive Owen in Shoot 'em Up or John Wick or something. If a Valley girl saw this and it was dressed in a varsity jacket, she'd go, that's like super hot. That was a good impression, wasn't it? Oh, looky here. It's that Pac-Man fellow again with the sequel to the incredible Pac-Man Championship Edition. It's a game that is insanely addictive, taking this very simple 1980s classic and reinvigorating it into a pure arcade experience for the 21st century. It rarely lets you blink and has no right to be as fun as it is. There's so many ghosts that they just don't let you rest. It just keeps going and going and going. It's hand-sweatingly brilliant, and it's pleasure that most people won't judge you for indulging in. You saucy old bugger Pac-Man with your terrific game. Fire Pro Wrestling is a game that doesn't seem to look or play much different from the very first game in the series way back in the era of the PC Engine. It's a game series that is a bit different from most other grapplers in the fact that the combat isn't based on button bashing, but instead based on timing and strategy. And in this, it's closer to real wrestling with its dips and troughs and its pacing. So yes, Fire Pro Wrestling matches the ebbs and flows of a real wrestling match, and while it may feel a little bit inaccessible at first, especially if you're used to other wrestling games, give it some time and soon you'll be suplexing like the best of them. Not only this, but if you want another wrestler who's not in the game, well, there is a highly supported custom creator that's easily accessible from the front page of the game, where you can download whatever WWE, AEW or legendary wrestler that you could possibly hope for. If you're a wrestling fan, this should be in your collection. Another reboot this, but the Hitman series successfully recreates that terse murder 'em up gameplay from the PS2 era, but gives it the grandeur and the game design that the newer hardware and its customers demanded. This one was updated frequently with new missions too, which is a nice treat for people who want to assassinate other people. More opportunities to slaughter are presented to you via the interwebs. What more can we ask for? Thanks, internets, you're not all porn and Deliveroo, are you? Huge maps packed with life will give you options galore, and also up the challenge. So if you liked Agent 47 back in the day, you'll find this a real hit, man. Sorry. A special telekinetically enabled boy escapes an oppressive, mysterious, fascistic government and is heavily pursued throughout this 2D puzzle platformer. But there's a bit more to this story, and clues are dispersed throughout the sombre and brutal tale. The ending is perhaps one of the most disturbing that the genre has ever seen, but it's a thought-provoking one too. The gameplay is solid and the animation is beautiful. It's just as good as its predecessor, which is Limbo. Playdead are dark-thoughted, creative little buggers, aren't they? Their first effort here is about a boy looking for his sister at the edge of hell. As you can see, it's a grimly pretty yarn with crumbling cities, killer buzzsaws, and horrible, horrible giant spiders that looks like the sort of animation you used to get on those late-night Slavic cartoons that Channel 4 randomly put on in the 1990s. It's a thought-provoking and compulsive adventure, which, much like Inside, doesn't have the cheeriest ending, but it is still an incredible experience. Do play this. Rockstar started the decade with this, a horse-based Grand Theft Auto game with lassos and flintlocks. Scarred former gang member John Marsden is an outlaw on the run from both the sheriffs and his old crew. Rockstar apply their usual levels of sheen to this, with a truly alive world full of citizens, coyotes, wrong-uns and cowpokes in a rich and sizable Wild West environment. Careful shooting, wall cover and the coolest slow-motion deadshot give the combat some weight, which is completely different in this. Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare. I'd say it's pretty unusual to put DLC in a list like this. Yeah, it is, that's fair enough. Zombies are set loose along with a bestiary of other creepy monsters in this add-on pack. Why is it here? Well, I mean, most of the game is the same. The maps are identical for one. But the key part of this is how it completely changes how the game is played. The mindless zombies run at you with no care for their lives. Cover shooting won't work. The 30 hours or so you spent perfecting your various shooting techniques count for nothing. You have to relearn it because those zombies will just run at you. They won't care if they get shot in the arm or the face. So you have to run and shoot at the same time. It rewires your brain. It's probably my favourite DLC of all time, even better than the ones that Rockstar themselves released for Grand Theft Auto 4. And it's one I'm glad that I paid the extra money for. I can't say that about all DLC. But yeah, Undead Nightmare, trust me, it's really, really bloody good. Horace, no relation to the one that went skiing, is the best Euro platformer we've seen since the Amiga last sat on a Dixon shelf in the mid-1990s. Paul Hellman, formerly of Probe, oversaw most of the game's development solo over a 7-year period, which is about as true to the bedroom coder as we're going to get on modern consoles in the second decade of the 21st century. It is a distinctly British Metroidvania with a great emotionally affecting story delivered with great humour, heart and love. It's available on all the newer major formats, so if you're of an age that remembers the Euro platformer and has some affection for it, I'd say you should get on it. Super Mario and its subsequent sequels remain the high watermark of 2D platforming some 40 years on. Yeah, you can stick your Sonic up your bum. And now those games are limitless. There's a lot of chaff on the servers of this immediately accessible platforming perfection toolkit, but there's also great works that would make old Shigeru Miyamoto nod like that Robert Redford gif. Super Mario Maker 2 is ridiculously fun to create things with, but also amazingly fun to play through. It is the title our Super Nintendo owning selves would have loved, as we may never have needed to buy any other cartridge ever again. from actually creating games to pretending to make games, with Kairosoft's mobile phone game gem and never bettered effort, that being Game Dev Story. Technically, this was released first in Japan as early as 1997, but it was only after a brush up and its launch on the iPhone and Android in its revised state that brought it to a wider audience. And you know what? The iPhone is the perfect place to play it. You start off as the CEO of a small video game company at the dawn of the 8-bit era and must endeavour to become an all-conquering behemoth like EA or Nintendo by the PS3 times. It's an addictive little simulator in the style of, I don't know, Theme Park or something like that, and given extra heft by its many video game references. It is an utter delight to play. If you've never played it, hopefully it's still on a server somewhere, go do that. Yet another story-driven survival horror game in dimly lit locations. So what earned Soma its lofty position on this list? Well, it's possibly the most intelligent but utterly terrifying conceptualised story in gaming history. 2 words: existential dread. Soma weaves this utterly depressing concept so effectively, creating what is probably the second most downbeat video game tale this side of I have no mouth but I must scream. You'll be hankering for Prozac like they were Skittles after this. And I know that makes it sound like something you might not want to play, but it really does have to be experienced. It will make you go, and then cry a lot. At the time, this was considered to be an overpriced demo, and perhaps it was, but Ground Zero's small and intricate map actually represents the absolute peak of the entire Metal Gear franchise in my opinion. The mechanics are mostly the same as the Phantom Pain, but it's all tightened up immeasurably, and that tiny little play area actually gives you an immense amount of methods and play modes to try. In the same way that Metal Gear Solid 2's demo represents the very best of that game's tricks and trappings, Ground Zeroes does the same with Metal Gear Solid 5. Metal Gear Solid 5 Phantom Pain was pretty good, but if the final game had played like Ground Zeroes the whole way through, you'd be looking at a close contender for the #1 slot in my list. I'm not kidding. If you haven't played Ground Zeroes, do play it, but make sure you play it enough, and you'll see what I mean. I'm not a huge fan of multiplayer online games, but if you give me an original idea that really appeals, I'll be well on board. The mission statement for Rocket League can be summed up in 2 words: car, football. That'll be me on board. The physics of the cars sort of act like motorised giant feet. Hit the ball with the outside of the vehicle and it should act like a foot hitting a ball in the exact same place. It should curve away a little. Drive up a ramp and swoop back down and you might deliver a bullet header. It is beguiling at first and you probably will get your bum spanked by the dedicated followers that this game has. So don't expect to be Optimessi Prime the first time you play it. But give it time and you'll be banging them in from all angles. Good, clean fun. Jumpers for goalposts. Here's another multiplayer online game I enjoyed. Friday the 13th has you as a close approximation of one of the doomed teens from the 80s movie franchise attempting to escape the confines of Camp Crystal Lake before they end up greasing the knife of Jason Voorhees with their blood. Alternatively, you may find yourself lucky to be in the shoes of Jason and hunting those self-same teens. This time, you've got plenty of powers with which to dispatch them, but there's just you. There's just you to kill all these teens, and Mother doesn't like it when you don't kill all the teens, does she? Friday the 13th is a fantastically atmospheric title that nails the feel of the cheesy 80s movies and also gives us a terse and often hilarious multiplayer game to boot. I can't recommend this highly enough, even though I'm not sure their server's still going for it. I think they are just about. Goat Simulator is a badly made, unfinished game, and it's been this way since it came out a decade back. But it's supposed to be that way, and that's why it's brilliant. It embraces its wretchedness of design and delivers a sandbox so overblown, daft and ridiculous that you'll be snorting snot out of your nose all over the place because it's just so bloody hilarious. I get that to put this over things like The Witcher 3, Fallout New Vegas and Dark Souls is completely mental. But may I remind you, I'm a big idiot that laughs at really dumb, stupid things. And this goat is no exception. I love a good puzzle game, and Monument Valley is the best puzzler of the 2010s, well, with the exception of something that's coming a bit later. The player must steer Princess Ida through mazes of optical illusions that look like an Escher painting. Switching around the geometry and looking for visual clues will lead you to each of the level's exits. And each discovery will give you an audible aha moment. A sequel to that sequel, and even a planned movie, yeah, that one surprised me too, shows that there's more fans of this than just me. But you owe it to yourself to get a bit of this if you haven't yet. It is terrific. There were a ton of first-person shoot-em-ups with all sorts of weapons, storylines, advanced techniques and other gumption throughout the 2010s, but one of my favourites was one that took us back to the genre's earliest times, its more nascent days, and it's one of the time's best games too, that being Doom. We're back blowing chunks out of Satan's masses, but with a modernised feel and look to it. Not much mind, the pureness of Doom is absolutely here, and I couldn't be happier for it. A brutal flashback to an era of mullets, Britpop, and neighbours being popular. Mario continues his Peach rescuing antics in yet another all-time classic. This time he finds a sentient hat with which to complete his mission. A hat that can mind control other characters and objects and use their distinct abilities in a decidedly non-linear adventure for the hairy-lipped pipe shifter. It feels like the spiritual successor to Mario 64, more so than Galaxy or Sunshine ever did, and it definitely should be mentioned in the same breath as that game. It's an all-time classic. If you've got a Switch, get this. Like a lot of games on this list, if at first you don't succeed, try again. These neon, ultra-loud, ultra-violent top-down action games will have you gripping the controller in knuckle-whitening faction, brutally murdering all in your path. It may not seem like it, but there is a route through these tough one-hit death levels, and you'll enjoy every attempt you do trying to figure it out. In fact, there's more than one route through it, I'll be bound. Intense arcade action, and both Hotline Miami 1 and 2 are equally good. And they don't cost much either these days, so do play them, you oaf. Titanfall was a good start, but Titanfall 2 is phenomenal. You control an agile pilot who can jump and wall run his way around with great aplomb, but you also get to jump inside a Titan, a mecha-style exoskeleton. Does that sound cool? It does. You're damn skippy it does sound cool, sunshine. And the smooth movement control, tactical gameplay, level design and fantastic single-player campaign make this absolutely perfect for fans of the genre. Poor planning in terms of the release date saw this flop, which meant despite its high review scores and myriad accolades, we're unlikely to see another, which is a tragedy. I've had a go at Konami, now I'm having a go at you, EA. Yay! Gotham City, city of... Oh, we can't finish that song anymore, can we? But what a cracker this game is. Following on from the Arkham Asylum game, Bruce is continuing to have a terrible time of things in a vast open-world environment that's rife with wrong-uns, the rogues gallery of criminals, and little Easter eggs aplenty. The familiar combat, brooding atmosphere, and array of bat gadgets are all present still. And it is more of the same, to be fair. but that's a very good thing indeed. Arkham Asylum feels like the series' high point, and one of the best Batman video games ever made. This is undisputable. Roguelikes are great because roguelikes can be played over and over again, and they're always a little bit different. So it's a great genre, and this might be the best of this genre. It helps me that this is a creepy, bloody game, because that creepiness and outright depravity, it was always going to appeal to a weird dude like me. It's imaginative, incredibly addictive, and full of power-ups that will keep you coming back for more, for months and months and months, utterly absorbing and bonkers fun. Undertale looks fairly underwhelming, doesn't it? It's a top-down role-playing game that used to sit in your Super NES gathering dust, but there's more to it than just a standard role-player. Combat is surprisingly nuanced, the off-the-wall humour is daft and brilliant, and there's a variety of endings that can only be accessed by you playing the game in a decidedly unconventional way for a game of this type. I can't really go into details on why it's so good, but it is really good. It's deceptively incredible, and I can only recommend that you give Undertale a try. I really feel that these games don't get the respect they deserve, so I'm here to talk them up. A lot of the games are more misses than hits, but when they're on point, they're really on point. Get a bunch of people in a room with this on your preferred machine and tell them to join in using their mobile phones as the controller, and you'll have the best night, provided you aren't a room full of boring twats anyway. The highlight, for me, TKO. TKO is outstanding, but Quiplash, Earwax, Madverse City, Joke Boat, Champed Up, You Don't Know Jack, Fibbage and Murder Party are all top tier entertainment too. If you're having a party, these should be as essential as beer and crisps. The first reboot was a fantastic reinvention, but Rise of the Tomb Raider is that idea perfected. A frostier land is here for Lara to dash about. An impressively detailed and realised Siberian landscape. The combat, stealth and range of player choice is compelling, as is the increase in side missions. It's a game about exploration, this, which should really be Lara's wheelhouse, shouldn't it? Rise is in every way better than the excellent forebears, both in its current iteration and its older titles too. I think for me, Rise of the Tomb Raider is the best Tomb Raider game there's ever been. A game where you control a mischievous waterfowl is an unusual choice for a number 12 entry in the list of the decade's best games. It's a nihilist's playground, this, as you dart about being a twat bird to everyone in the sleepy English village. And it's this weird, homely Englishness that I think pushes it up the list for me a little bit, as there used to be a lot of this kind of Englishness in 80s games from UK studios, and I'm kind of nostalgic occasionally for it. It's the sort of game, okay, maybe not in this form, that would have been something I would have played on the ZX Spectrum or something. Trust me, I'm far from being a British's best in terms of my mindset, but the quirkiness of this goosey gobshite 'em up really hit me in a certain way that I can't define. It's a really fun game. Do play it, even if you're not English. I said Monument Valley was the best puzzle game, didn't I, earlier? But this is probably the better one out of the two, I'd say. I'm a bit of an idiot, but Monument Valley is a bit more of a traditional puzzler, whereas this is its own original thing, if you ignore the first game. This game follows up the original with a larger, more thorough venture. GLaDOS is joined by the Stephen Merchant-voiced meek robot Wheatley, which gives this space door gun title and its ingenious arenas a lot more character to the proceedings. Portal 2 is bloody good. Please do play it if you haven't before. The Walking Dead Series 1 was released at the peak of the TV series, and it perfectly captured what made that TV series good in its early days. Just like the TV series, the game series fell off a bit of a cliff in its later episodes, but it was never bettered than this. Walking Dead isn't really connected to that TV series or the comic book, it's its own thing, but it still follows the basic tropes. Zombies are a real threat, but the survivors are often the real monsters, as seen in Telltale's interactive Story Adventures Farmhouse episode. That one will make your jaw drop. You've got some tough decisions to make as lead character Lee. These will test your morality and your common sense. At times this game is gobsmacking, and it's not because of its graphics or play mechanics. It's a masterpiece in storytelling, and nothing other than that. If you don't feel emotional during the game's final scenes, then you're pretty much emotionally dead, I think. I've only sobbed like this before when, like, a close relative or a friend or a pet has died. I was in tears after this game, and I think you should play it because you will be too. Poor old Clem. Yo ho ho and a barrel of fun. The best version of Assassin's Creed is almost certainly this tropically themed effort, all sun-soaked and just as stabby as the other games in the series. The seafaring setting seems to fit this game so well. There's so much to do both in the Caribbean islands and on the high tide in your ship. You shouldn't get bored during its duration. One of the very few games that I finished 100% during the 2010s because I loved it that much. It's an incredible game. If you're an Assassin's Creed fan and you haven't played this, then you're not an Assassin's Creed fan, you great ape. Rockstar do the details very, very well. Every blade of grass, every pebble on the coastline, every crack in the paving slabs. It's a huge game map, but it's so full and it's so vital. The story, a tale of three very different criminals, is packed with the usual Rockstar snark. But it's the vast playbox that is the real attraction of San Andreas. And all those details packed into it that makes it so brilliant. The online mode would push this to the #1 slot if it wasn't full of utter twats. Rockstar again, back so soon? Yes, and Red Dead Redemption again as well. And this is the GTA 5 engine version of that game. Boy oh boy, the same level of detail in GTA is here, but in the Wild West setting with a map even bigger than Grand Theft Auto 5's. Whereas Grand Theft Auto 5 is a game of loud explosions and neon colours and loud pop music, Red Dead 2 is generally very chilled and calming during its exploratory moments, right until a big bear runs through the woods and claws your head off. But yeah, the story's very compelling as well, a prequel to Red Dead Redemption. I will say the opening segment does put a lot of people off, but once you get through that, you'll see one of the very best games of the 2010s. Another huge adventure in a massive world. You could probably play this game for 100 odd hours without ever going near most of the main quest. The possibilities are huge, and that's before you even get to the modding community that make everyone nude and make the dragons look a lot like Thomas the Tank Engine. This would be a lot of people's #1, and rightly so. I've never given it the time it deserves, and so it's only at #6 for me. A beautiful game from Naughty Dog, the developers of the Uncharted series. The Last of Us follows Joel and Ellie's relationship, which is just as compelling as fellow adoptive father and daughter pairing Lee and Clem in the Walking Dead game. But this has the benefit of superb graphics and gameplay too. It was a real system seller back in the day, and now a hit TV show, which just goes to show the level of quality in its script. That said, it might well put you off adding extra mushrooms to your pizza though. As well as being the era of story-driven games and big open-world adventures the size of Europe, the 2010s were also the realm of the Metroidvania revival, and this was the best one. As the titular knight, you're exploring the diseased Hallow Nest Kingdom, a subterranean network packed with friends and foes alike. Controls were tight, the challenge was tough but not oppressive, and the overall look of the game was both distinct and charming enough for me to plough hours into it. Hollow Knight is a masterpiece. Although this whole 100 has been a very personal one, the top 3 is especially personal to me. The game right here is my son's favourite game of all time, bar none, and it was great to give him advice and assistance once he got stuck in the game. That this was a debut title for the Switch, and still its most impressive and beloved title, is astonishing. But it is a tremendous, and out of the already incredible Legend of Zelda, it's probably the best one, which is no mean feat. My son is never wrong, except when he is, the little turd. This is down to me being a man-child again. You see, my favourite superhero is this red and blue fella right here. And this game finally gave me the Peter Parker simulator I'd wanted since I was 6 years old. New York is packed with landmarks, both real and marvelly. Everything from the Avengers Tower to the Sanctum Sanctorium to even Jessica Jones's office window. They're represented here. I couldn't see Christian Ritter through the window, but then it is a game about Spider-Man rather than Spider-Perv, I suppose. The best thing, though, is the travel between these locations. It's so much fun to web around places like Devil's Kitchen and Manhattan. And the combat is glorious too, making full use of both Spider-Man's agility and his web shooter technology. It's so good that I might actually have to buy a PlayStation 5 when Spider-Man 2 finally comes out. That's how much I love this, and that's a lot of money. Yes, number 1, can you believe it? Here we are, finally. It's a number 1 that should explain why I'm not doing the individual years and closing this series, for now at least, with Shovel Knight. It's full circle for me. Shovel Knight is a tribute to the NES platformers I used to love so much. There's a bit of NES Bionic Commando in there, one of my very favourite games. There's a lot of Mega Man in there, one of my favourite series, and there's a pinch of DuckTales 2, and I didn't mind DuckTales either. It's those, but it's also a bit more than that. There's a level of depth that perhaps wasn't there in those NES games. I'm so pleased that the indie scene is full of games like this, as although I found plenty of joy in AAA games, as you've seen throughout this list, I need games like Shovel Knight too. Without it and its ilk, I think there's a possibility I might get completely left behind. I have a bit, and I may never get that same feeling from new games ever again, but that's okay. There are hundreds of games I've played throughout this series, all the way dating back to 1985 to this 2010s episode that I can go back to, and there's many more that I've never played at all. I'll never run out, will I? So it doesn't matter if I do play games in the 2010s or the 2020s. I'm happy with the hobby I've got, and I don't feel I'm missing out too much. Anyway, thank you for sitting through this incredibly long, well, I'd say actually overly long video. Let me know how disgusted you are by me leaving out your favourite title from the top 100 or the top 10 or whatever. Leave that as a comment below. Do check out the previous years to see how wrong I got those as well. But for this video, and indeed this series, thanks for coming along. Please subscribe, and Kay, thanks, bye. Toodaloo!